Andy, as always, it's a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, Doug, I think you just said it's really a pleasure for me because you've been such a help along the way. And we've developed a pretty good relationship around it, even though it probably wasn't as direct help, but it was great having you with me.
And part of the reason, and we'll get to it a little bit, that you sponsored this course that we're putting on, Self-Defined Living, a self-improvement course for autistic. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we go back a long way. I don't know, there's very few people that I've interviewed, and now I've done like about 300 interviews at this point. But there's very few people I've went as far back as with you, Andy. So I'm just trying to remember. Do you remember when we first met? Let's start.
I do, but I got to tell you, I've never been interviewed, so this is going to be an interesting discussion anyway. But Doug, we met probably 15 years ago, and it was within the first year that two of my sons were diagnosed with autism, and they were, they were middle-aged. I think one was 8 or 9, and the other was 2 or 3. And so you were there right when it all was going down, and a big help. So it was a long time ago. My guess is that's about 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was. It might have been. I think it was like 2007, 2008, at the Autism Expo.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It was such a big help because what you don't know makes you very worried. And the weird thing was, as the questions and the identification of what autism was about, it was still early even in that criteria. And it really helped me get through the time back then and helped me identify things personally that I needed help with. So it was all good.
What have been some things, like what have been some of like the things that have been most helpful to you in your journey?
Well, I will tell you, early on, getting some support from other parents and professionals that were going through the same thing, because there's no answer, even though the problem was identified, right? And the reality is, it's not even a problem if you can help the kids or yourself through early on. And I would say it's good to have a sounding board on what you're doing. And if it doesn't work, you don't have to complain about it. And the other side of it was that you bring up the Autism Expo because it's something I've always told a lot of professionals in the special needs world. Having a yellow pages of stuff to do when you don't know what the problem really is about is going to eventually run you out. There's too many choices. And you could talk to any single individual that's a professional sometimes, and at the time, they knew what the answer was. But it only worked for some of the people there. And I look at it a little differently. I actually think helping navigate through those things is probably how you helped me, by being a resource. I mean, you never gave us direct support, did you? Other than you helped out Peter when he was real little. You chased him when you ran across out of the stadium and all the way across all the downtown streets.
Do you want to share that story? Because that was an interesting experience for sure.
Well, I think I'll start it and you can end it. How about that? Well, sure. we were at a show. We were at a Reds game at the stadium down in Riverfront, and Peter was probably about 3 years old then, and he was super. He's, I guess, sensory. Not sensory. Different sensory impacts would make him respond. What do you call that, Doug? I forget what the name was, because my other son
he's like a sensory seeker.
Yeah. So my other son is sensory avoider, and then Peter was a sensory seeker. That is definitely true. Yeah. And so we were at a Reds game, and there was a pretty big hit or a foul ball that went into our section, and everybody stood up and started screaming and yelling. And Peter was so upset that it triggered him, and he started screaming and yelling in the, a big crowd of people, and it shut down everybody. They all got quiet and were looking at us, and we had to walk out. And, we were calm about it and did it the right way, but Peter was running out, and he just left the stadium, went across these majorly busy streets with and that's kind of what I remember. And you were running after him. I was quite keeping up with him. So do you remember that?
Oh, yes, I remember that very well. Even though it was well over a decade ago, like for people watching and listening, this was in downtown Cincinnati, where the Reds play. And, I'm thankful that, well, you were keeping up, Andy. I think you were just like afraid, like kind of, you had that adrenaline going, I think.
Well, it's exhausting as a parent. And you know what? I hear a lot of times individuals and my kids complain about parents and what they've done and doing stuff. And I totally get it. But on the other side of it is we're trying to help. I mean, we don't know what to do. And you got to look on both sides. I think it's always true when things are going on. But it's been a stressful thing for me for 15 years. And Doug, that's what our relationship has been about. You've been there, not questioning some of the tough things that have gone on, and they're not punishments ever. They're trying to help, and my kids actually all are so functional. They're doing much better than if we didn't have the inputs that are available right now. And I can actually identify with many of the things that they identify on the spectrum because I grew up with it too. They just didn't have any definition of it at the time.
Now, one of the things that we were both involved in was a group for fathers of children on the autism spectrum. What was your memories of this group? I have very fond memories of. I guess it probably went on for about a year or two.
Yeah, it went on for probably about 2 years.
Yeah.
You had left and it stayed going for a little while, but we need people like you to keep things rolling, Doug. It was a bunch of fathers of kids that were diagnosed on the spectrum. And you know what? It gave us a chance to get out and talk to people. We never talked about the autism stuff at all, but it let us get out and kind of get through what takes up 100% of your care. I mean,
yeah,
it takes over. And this is something I would say some of your people that are on the spectrum, not a bad thing, realize that your parents, people care, and they put almost everything else on hold. And that creates a problem for them as well. And so getting out in a group of people with similar stuff, it was nice to hear because things were so similar, but we were totally different. It was a unique diversity group.
It was. And I think one of the interesting things that you bring up is that, I mean, every once in a while we would, people would kind of discuss like their kids and what's their experience, their children's experience with autism and maybe some of the things that they're going through. But most part, it was, most of the time we were just, we would go out at nights and have a beer or two. I think it was only about a beer or two. I don't think anyone had too much more than that. And just, just like, it was just a kind of a great place to, I don't know, like to develop community. And did you like that connection?
I thought so, because it got me involved in a lot of things in the community. And Doug, it was Autism Speaks, which a lot of the people complained about, and it's not good, and this is not good, or everybody points at different organizations saying it wasn't good, right? But it was great because we got to be around families that had similar things. We got access to resources and different people. I remember it. That was another time Peter split. I don't know if you were there at the time. We had a thunderstorm, and he went crazy. I mean, he's down at Coney Island by the river, totally a dangerous place. And he went split off of the entire crowd, and we couldn't find him for about half an hour while the rain was falling like a monsoon. And there were so many people there looking for him. I felt comfortable. And one of the ladies that was a friend of ours found him, Lisa.
Yeah.
Were you there then?
I was not there. No, I was not there.
it was crazy. I really enjoyed, I will tell you, I went with not just my kids, but other people from our office and relationships, and they all loved the fact that the community was so big and helpful. Um, Peter loved it too, except for the thunderstorm made a issue. Uh, it was weird. I just thought about that.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything prepared for today either. So you're triggering memories.
I hope that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's fine. You know what? We were all there. Look, we all help out what we can.
Yeah.
That was my point I was really
Yeah.
making before. And I think that for the parents, especially for fathers, because even though we might be primary caregivers, there is no support in the community typically, because typical support is for typical families, moms who stay at home or are the primary caregivers, right? That's not true all the time. And particularly for me, I'm a single parent only caregiver. So you know what, you can't change those things. I'm not angry about it, but I think it was very helpful having fathers there. We had different perspectives. We were really different, but I think everybody there was like to relax and step away for a second.
Now, I think you would be a good person to ask about this because when I'm thinking about my life, like I think that like so many of the important relationships that I have are as a result of being connected to the autism community. So, how has being part of that community like been helpful in your life?
It's incredible. I can't ever erase it. It's the highest value there is. I don't know if, I mean, I've been on the Hamilton County Board of Disability Services for 10 years because when we had some really critical issues happening very early, they came in and helped out a lot. And I want to give my time back to it. And in the interim of the 10 years I've been there, they've helped me help my kids navigate stuff in a way that totally is, they never make judgments. I know sometimes people do, but you know what? We don't have answers to everything. And having relationships in the community allows you to get through difficult times. And the results have been totally positive, not 100% positive, but I would say not expected the successes based on when both of my kids were much younger. One is totally independent, and the other one is no one could ever tell that there's any differences. He's highly functional, super smart, and they both of them, they understand they're different and um, they need to be responsible for their interactions with other people, just like their parents need to be responsible for them, and everybody does. That's the same for all typical people. I don't even know if is anybody typical. But you know, we all have different perspectives, and you have to recognize your own, but you have to be respectful of other people's, and that's how you can be successful in the community. And so your question about my relationship with the community, it's not just service. I tried to give back to it, and every time I give back, I get more from it. So you never can give what you receive. And that's partially why I want to support your program as an autism coach, Doug. I think it's super important to engage with people, up to them a lot of times. I have the same thing with my business. It really is up to people to engage and see how the match goes. And I know you're very good at it.
Now, you were just talking about being involved in Hamilton County Disability Services. You're not just involved, you are the vice president, I believe. So I'm really curious, like as a father, you get, certain services, for your sons, but what have you kind of learned being on the inside and, kind of now being the vice president of a developmental disability board?
Well, look, it's like everything else. Um, People, when someone has a problem, typically they're always looking for places to blame or an immediate answer. The reality is, it's up to the person to navigate the problems. And what the county board in Hamilton County is, it's amazing. They do help people navigate it. And um, they pay for some medical services for parents and families, especially when kids are young and there's a lot of medical costs going on. Um, they can get you into publicly funded medical services that can save you a lot of money and allow for the right direction to go. Um, it's very difficult for parents to accept that and sometimes apply for it. I think that's a problem. Um, there's a lot of discourse in the, whether it's public funding or private charitable or just private things, where people point fingers across the line. Look, everybody has to, we have to support professionals like you in the community to make sure that you're there to help other families, whether it's autism or it's some other disability or anything else. It doesn't matter. Most of what the county boards do is for more physical disabilities and typical things. Coming on to the autism support, if you want to really realize it, they shifted it over to the school districts for the early help, which is amazing. Now they do have the early intervention stuff, but most people don't see the issue, at least for highly functional type autism. And pardon me if that's the wrong term now, because I don't know what keeps changing. But there's definitely more functionally affected individuals. But for the individuals that are primarily in the thought differences that come to the autism thing, I don't think it's really recognized till social interactions start happening outside of the family. I may be wrong because I'm not at that point now in the diagnosis and stuff, but so a lot of times the school districts are responsible. It used to be that individuals that were on the spectrum that couldn't participate in typical schools would be going to a special ed school. They didn't even have a diagnosis. Well, now most of the school districts handle that themselves. And there's other schools that can handle for more extreme problems or specific problems that are identified. Those are good things. I wouldn't complain about the old school stuff, because in order for us to get to where we are, we have to go through what was a big advantage back then, because having a special school at that time made it so the kids didn't just stay at home all the time and never got to be included in the community. And this is true for all disabilities. So please pardon me if I ever say the wrong label on something, but we're at a point now where it's totally different. For disabled individuals of all types, there's no longer work centers. Those are out of, I've seen it in the 10 years I've been on the board. That's not publicly funded anymore or even allowed. Now it's about individual support in the community. And that's great, but realize that it's much more complicated for the people that are supporting, because now you're supporting individuals one-on-one instead of in a group. And that transition is underway right now. I think things like what you do support that intrinsically. And it's very important. That's why I supported you. I saw it out. It wasn't even God, I didn't even think a second. If I can help you and the type of things you do, whether it's repeating it with other individuals or people that work in your organization, we need more of it. We don't have enough young professionals pushing to the next level of integrating people that are different into the community, and that applies across everything that's different. We're in a tough time period right now too, so it's tough for everybody though. So yeah, it's all good. Does that answer your question?
It did. Yeah, and I know you've been, beyond supporting, this course. Over the years, you've supported lots of different initiatives in the autism community. Why is that? Why have you kind of consistently been doing that for so long now, since I've known you?
Well, until as a family we experienced the diagnosis, and it was a difficult time. It created a lot of problems for the adults involved. I never received help or asked for help before that. and maybe I did, I just didn't notice it. But what I realized was if you don't ask for help, sometimes you can't move forward. And as you said, I've supported a lot of things in the special needs community. I will continue to. It's very important to me. I can never give what I've gotten. And that's both time, donations, whatever it is. If somebody wants to talk to me, that's why you requested this. Look, we live in a community regardless of how much we want to accept what the differences are. And I think it's really important to support it to help me move forward. And it has. So I appreciate it very much, Doug.
And is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to discuss, Andy?
Well, I don't know what we were going to talk about. So please let me review this before you submit it to anything.
It was great. It was great. I think people will enjoy the conversation. So thanks so much.
Honestly, and here's the other thing for the people that are there. If you want to talk to somebody that's navigated through this time, I didn't navigate through. I got through it. I'm at a point now where my kids are launching and will be independent. Not everything was positive all the way through, but I'm more than happy to share with you how I've thought about it and gotten through it because people shared it with me. And that's how you get through. It's very important to not just think you have the answers, because there aren't necessarily answers, but there's a path that can make it supportive and successful. And there's the one thing I would argue against is pointing fingers and complaining about what's not going right and this and the other thing. If you just stay there and do that, you're not moving forward. It's about finding the right supports and the right help and giving what you can to do it.
Well, as always, Andy, it's always an enjoyable conversation. Thanks so much for joining me, and look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Hey, definitely, Doug. We're lucky to be able to see each other. So we'll talk to you soon.